All right, so I'm gonna try to talk about wiring here to the best of my knowledge. All right, so wiring. Wiring is actually pretty simple. A lot of people think of it as like a daunting task. Oh man, it's kind of like everything else on your bike. You learn to weld, not everything's gonna be perfect. The things you create, grind, weld, shape, they're all gonna be, to the best of your abilities. If you're like me, nothing's ever perfect. You can polish a turd, but it's definitely gonna be way wonky, to say the least. And that's the way my wiring's gonna be. It's not gonna be perfect. It's getting better the more I do it, but the first few times I've done it, it's been pretty haggard, and it usually takes me about 2 or 3 times to get it really dialed in. I mean, my Sportster, I wired it up, and the first time I couldn't get the starter to go. The second time something else happened, and then I got it dialed in. And then I rode it for a summer, and then painted it, put it back together, and rewired it instead of just having a bunch of boogers everywhere. That ran until about a few months ago, and then I had a bunch of electrical issues, and then I figured out the relay was probably wired wrong, so it wasn't even working. So saying that, the first step I always do is just look over the bike, think about it, whatever you gotta do, get your big boy brain on, get your little piece of paper, your notepad like me. I can't remember or think about anything unless I write it down. I always write everything down. Helps to look at the bike and just write down the things you know need power. So you just write down as many things as you can. Just to think about what you need helps when you get to the next step. All right, so the next step, I always look at the schematic in the manual. Whatever you gotta do to be able to like highlight it, use your fingers, your toes, I don't know, use a Sharpie, a crayon, go to the fire pit, get a piece of wood that's charred, whatever you got to do to trace back all the lines. What I like to do is I like to go to Kinko's and put the book down, have them copy it, and then I get like a pretty big schematic, 11 by 17. Then I just go at it. You don't need to do that, of course, it's pretty extreme. Did that with a newer bike with like EFI, and it just has so much to think about, and I couldn't figure it out, so it was a little easier for me to separate things. But 2004 and earlier for like Sportsters in general are really easy, and then anything older than that is even easier because you're just down to the basics. So once you find the things that you need on the schematic, and then you can right away say, oh, I don't need blinkers. You can cross those out, or mentally, whatever you're doing at this point. We're gonna go with what I think you should do. I think you should print it out and highlight what you need. So right away, get your black Sharpie, take off the blinkers, the horn, any kind of electronics on the carburetor, anything extra, stereos, whatever. All the little boxes on the schematic that have the wires going in and they separate, the connectors basically, just cut it out. So once you get to that point, you're pretty much halfway there. Just trace from the start of what you need and kind of just, our spider web back and forth, try to figure it out. Let me draw it out and it'll make way more sense, and I'll just talk about it as I draw over it. All right, welcome to the drawing board. I'm gonna draw this out and talk over it. So let's get into this. So, sorry for the birds and all the animals. They won't shut up ever. So right away, I'm gonna do my motorcycle I'm doing right now. So I write it down, shovelhead, and it's a cone shovel. And I usually write how it starts, key. All right, right there it tells me I got electronics or points, obviously what kind of motorcycle, and then how I turn it on. So I usually try to break this down into separate parts. So the first part I always do is how the motor gets power. So I'm just gonna crudely draw everything. So you start with your battery, and normally every other part I just keep going to the next part, and then back and forth. But how I start is the regulator and the battery. So how's the battery charge itself? Well, through the regulator. So here's a cool little regulator. All right, what I do there is I put a little amp fuse box here. You get the idea. Between the two. On a shovel head, and if you got a starter, you're gonna need the solenoid. And this is where I got confused, because I didn't know anything about solenoids and all that. So there's a long post, I'll go over this in a second, and a short post. Okay, and then the solenoid goes to the starter. Very crude. And then how I'm gonna start this bad boy is a key switch. So you got the key switch like that. And then to keep the motor going, I'm gonna need a coil. I'm just gonna label some of this stuff just so you can differentiate the two. And then, so coils go to the spark plugs. And that's how the bike, oh, actually, you better get some points going. Okay, you got some points. And then now it's that's kind of how I see a bike. This is how it should run. This can be an on and off switch, push button, starter. You could take away these and kickstart it. You know, not just with these elements, but this is the basics of it. But with the key switch, you're gonna need a fuse. And for a shovel head, they have like solenoid on the left side of the bike if you're facing forward towards the front of the bike, and then on the right, on your right leg, they'll have another thing that looks like a solenoid, but it's on the other side underneath the, I'm pretty sure that's a relay, but I just use the newer style one. Okay, so then how the heck, what do I need to run with the bike running? So I need a tail light. So I do tail light. I always do tail light square. T for tail light, and then I need a headlight. Oh yeah, H for headlight. And on this shovel head, I'm gonna be doing a neutral and an oil light, just because it's already on the bike. That's a little extra for you. But it's the same concept, they're all lights. And I always like to separate them, all the power elements, with a switch, just in case I have a failure and I need to test stuff, I can just turn it off and on. So I go from the switch, and then I go, oh yeah, don't forget the brake light switch. That way you can activate the brake light. So that's pretty much all I'm gonna use on this one. Let's wire this bad boy. Let me get another thing, get another color. Everybody loves a good red. First, actually, before I go red, I try to find the grounds. And what I do is I think of it like this. I ground the main ground to the frame. And then that keeps the whole bike grounded. So anything like a light, so your headlight, grounded to the frame, your tail light grounded to the frame. These little lights are grounded by the part that they come out of, but that's pretty much the same concept. Grounded. Usually grounds are pretty simple. That's the easiest, because you're just trying to get hot to every part, and any part that's big like a starter, solenoid, is grounded to the motor of the frame. All right, let's get some power to all this stuff. Okay, so go start over here. So the regulator is the first thing I wire up. Uh-oh, there we go. Regulator. I don't know how you guys do it. Some people do it differently, but I always Actually, I'm going to do this. I always put it to the fuse. And then to get the fuse hot, you're going to have to wire it in. So there's basically one main going to the fuse. Now the fuse is hot, and then this will cycle through here and keep the battery charging. All right, let's keep trekking here. So this is where it starts getting fishy. So to get power to the starter, this solenoid, the long post, this one here, there's two large posts and one small one. The longest post goes straight to the battery. It should be the other big cable. There we go. There's that bad boy. And then you want the other big post to go to the starter. And that should engage the starter. Now you want to start the starter. So the little guy is whatever goes to your button, your on and off switch, whatever. But for now, we got a relay. So we like to be really complicated. Let's write this out because they're complicated. And I'm probably going to screw this up. So the relays have numbers on them, and I always look up the schematics. I actually have a video on it. I'll put it up here somewhere. Put a relay on a key switch. So anyways, let's see. I have it as 85 as ground. So right away, that's another ground. 30. Let's do one number at a time. That's how I usually do it. So 30, I think, is the power. Yep. So let's get that red going. So 30 is going to be off that post. But also 30 goes to the battery on this thing. So we're going to do B, because there's always a B on the switch. Then you might as well do the other stuff. So mine has a start in the center, ignition, accessory, which I never use. I don't know why they even have it. So I think they usually have A, B, and G, and you can kind of go from there. Key switches can be kind of weird, but this one's really simple, the one I have. That's why I always get them. So this is where the power comes in to the key switch, and then when you turn it to ignition, that powers everything else. So before you start the bike, the lights come on and all that. So what I do, I run a main, and then this I run to the coil. Boom. I usually run a separate one, but for this I'm just going to run one wire. Just mental note that. And then to the coil, other side of the coil goes to the points. So power to the coil, points go back and forth and talk to it. Now you need to wire up all these lights. So what I usually do is go to the on and off switch. So right there you got power. And then power, you can pretty much just hook all the power up to all this stuff. And we'll start with the easy stuff. We'll go, these guys need power. This guy needs power. This is always where sometimes you have a couple of drinky poos and you get confused. So you go to the brake switch, and the other side of the brake switch goes to the light. Oh no, what do I do now? You go like that. Yeah, that seems better, because there's a brake in it. And anytime you hit this brake, it sends more power to there. More power. Okay, so that's on and off. You turn all these on and off. You can hardwire, like bypass the switch. You can hardwire these lights so they do their own thing. But I always accessory on a switch. All right, so back to this. So you got the whole bike hot, and all the accessories do what it's got to do. Now you want to start the thing. So this is where you come back to the solenoid, and that goes to 87. Gotta change the color. 87. And then 86 is start. And then bam. I was probably backwards, but you get the idea. You turn the key on real quick. You go to start it. So that's S. Boom, it runs through here. Diverts the power to there. And that's pretty much it. That's how I am gonna wire this bike, and that's how I do it. Normally I use a piece of paper and doodle this stuff up. Just do what I know what works. And then when I have questions, I look up the part and go from there. Just go slow. It's not a very daunting task. Just, you know, once you do it once you wire one bike, you got it. Once you fire it up, go down the road, and nothing's on fire, that's it. You're the wiring guru after that. All your buddies are gonna be wanting you to wire it all up like you're a pro. But at this point, I could pretty much just do it. I couldn't do it from scratch. I'd do a lot of hiccups, like the bike I just worked on. I did some dumb things on it, and then as I was wiring it up, I realized what I was doing and I fixed it. But from experience, yeah, on paper it doesn't always work out, but as you're putting things together and just the slow process of putting the wires together, the light bulb will come on and go, oh, I'm messing up, I'll fix it. And it makes a lot more sense when you're slowing it down and you're chopping the wires up. But yeah, that's wiring. Pretty basic stuff. It's complicated, but all you gotta do is just break it into different things. Don't make it one big task. Don't make it one big giant oopsie. Just do one thing, go to the next, and it's just like any other thing you do with your chopper. You don't build every piece in one day. You know, it's one day at a time. It's the same with wiring. You're not gonna just sit there and just pile through it. If you do, more power to you. If you know what you're doing and I'm wrong, go in the comments, let everybody know what I'm boogering up. I'm learning too, so I'm just here to tell you what I do, and hopefully it'll help somebody out. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.